Yeah, unfortunately, the eco movement is very ableist. Now, I have seen some strides in some good directions in recent years, but it's still not enough. From blanket straw bans to not censoring disabled voices when it comes to climate policy, this is a problem that we really need to talk about more. Hello everyone, it's Emma and welcome back to my channel where I talk about all sorts of things zero waste, focusing on free, easy, and fun ways to live low waste and practical ways to be an activist. If I talk a little bit too fast for you, there's a gear icon right down here where you can change the speed of the video to something that better suits you. And of course, I think everybody should be talking about this, including able-bodied people, but I am also disabled. And I bring this up because my disability is invisible. I have chronic migraines as well as arthritis. And I say this because accessibility does not just affect people with visible disabilities, you know, visible accessibility aids, like a guide dog or things like that. There are plenty of people that are disabled in your life that you probably don't actually know are disabled. And also, anybody can become disabled at any point in their life. So fighting for accessibility should be of everybody's concern because it does nothing but benefit everyone. So this is why we should all care about ableism. But what is eco-ableism? Well, according to ScienceDirect.com, eco-ableism is discrimination against disabled people arising in environmental activism, policy, and planning. It may be intentional or unintentional. Perhaps you've picked up a pre-cut watermelon and thought, who in the world would buy this? It's so wasteful, we should ban this immediately. I have even seen people on the internet make videos along those lines, like, I can't believe people would buy a pre-cut watermelon, it's such a waste of plastic, blah, blah, blah. And unfortunately, that is unintentional ableism. And why? Well, because some disabilities prevent people from being able to carry something heavy like a watermelon, might prevent somebody from being able to stand for long periods of time to cut that watermelon, a disability that prevents them from even being able to use a knife. So this is unintentionally ableist from an eco standpoint. The person who would say those things had good intentions because they're concerned about the environment, they are concerned about plastic. And that's another reason why I bring up these conversations, so that we can all have more nuance, more empathy, and think about people with different lived experiences than ourselves. But eco-ableism might also look like holding a meeting about climate change in a building that does not have a ramp or an elevator. It might be putting a blanket straw ban into place in your state or your country without realizing that some people do need straws to literally survive. It also looks like shaming people for using medication that comes in plastic, which happens to me a lot, and other things of that nature. And while unintentional ableism is definitely less bad than intentional ableism, it's still not great. And this is why I really just encourage people to reflect on what they think and feel about the environmental movement and think about why someone does something, because you don't know someone's full story unless you ask them. It really doesn't make sense to judge someone for using plastic or, you know, driving a car or taking a flight or whatever it is. Keep in mind, not everybody wants to talk about their disability, so you might not want to just come out and say, like, what's your disability? Is that why you're using plastic? You know, don't be rude when having these conversations, but you can also do it in an educational way. And you can always add those caveats, like, hey, if you're able to, have you thought about buying a plain package-free watermelon and cutting it yourself? Then it's more of a question, an educational opportunity, a chance for a conversation instead of just being really pointed about it and judgmental. Now, intentional ableism is a different story. This looks like purposefully ignoring disabled voices when it comes to climate policy. This looks like shutting down disabled voices when they speak their concerns about things like straw bans. It may look like not even inviting disabled people to come speak on panels or attend town halls and things of that nature. Now, why is this a problem? As I mentioned, disabled people are already extremely marginalized, and anybody can become disabled at any time. Not only that, marginalization just compounds in times of climate crisis, in times of any crisis. I really like what Curious Earth has to say here about the detriment of eco-ableism. They say it is a failure by non-disabled environmental activists to recognize that many of the climate actions that they are promoting make life more difficult for disabled people. Again, it compounds the marginalization. It's already hard enough to live in an ableist society when you are disabled. That's even before we add the factors of the climate crisis and those issues that it poses. Not only the climate crisis itself, but also these climate solutions like straw bans, which can make life more difficult as a disabled person too if their voices are not heard in the first place. So here's an example. We all know that we're a little bit too car reliant in the US. If we were to suddenly ban all cars and make it mandatory for people to take public transit, walk, or bike, this means that many disabled people can now no longer get around. Many people rely on cars for transportation, and also that's not even just disabled people. Plenty of able-bodied people too live in areas where it's not walkable, it is not bikeable, and there's no public transportation. So once again, looking through this lens that accessibility benefits everyone. Now, I'm not advocating for plastic here. I'm not advocating for cars here. I'm not saying that these things are great. I'm just saying that they are necessary for some people to survive. And I'm saying that the issue of plastic and the issue of carbon emissions is much more nuanced than just banning or not banning these things. I think a possible solution for something like plastic straws would be asking customers if they need a straw. Instead of just handing everybody a straw when you get up to a table as a waiter or a waitress, or you're filling a bag full of stuff in the drive-thru, ask people, hey, do you need a straw with your order? hey, do you need a plastic spoon with your order? And same at a grocery store, do you need a bag for your order? Because then people have the option to say yes or no without being judged, without being criticized. And also, it reduces a lot of waste because plenty of people don't need a straw. Plenty of people don't need a bag. And it can still reduce waste without impacting disabled people. Now, what can we do about this? I've got some solutions here that you can implement whether you are a content creator or not, but some of these are content creator specific. So if you're a fellow eco content creator or a content creator of any niche and genre, I hope that you include these tips in some of your content. So first, let's make our activism inclusive for everyone. Whether it's online or in-person activism, here are a few tips. Make flyers, posters, and signs accessible by using easy-to-read fonts, making them not too busy, and posting them in areas that people frequent. Be sure to center disabled voices. In fact, include all groups of marginalized people in your meetings, protests, teach-ins, etc. This is easier said than done. You can't just invite marginalized people and expect everybody to show up. You also have to make the environment inclusive and welcoming for all people. Be sure to think through your eco decisions before implementing them by asking things such as, how will this affect disabled people? Or how will this affect other insert group of marginalized people here? Because it's very easy to think through my lens. And same with you, it's very easy to think about our own lifestyle, whether that be your income, your race, your gender, your sexuality, your ability or disability. Whatever it is, it's very easy to think through your worldview, which is why it's important to have conversations with people of all different walks of life, to have some nuance, to have some empathy, and think about all these different, aspects, characteristics that affect everybody differently. And also, number 2, make your activism accessible as well. First, we'll talk about online activism because I think they're a little bit different here. Content creators, make your content accessible. I am still working on this. If you have suggestions for me, please let me know. Honestly, if you have any tips that go along with any of these categories, please leave them down below for the rest of us. But some ideas here are image descriptions, easy to read fonts, speaking clearly, and so forth. I definitely need to work on speaking clearly. It also doesn't hurt to keep your content as free as possible to make it accessible for all budgets too. And second here, this goes for in person as well. Be very mindful of the language that you're using. Whether that's posters, talks, presentations, graphics, videos, etc. I used to do this, for example. Don't just say, you should walk instead of drive. It's so much better for the environment. This excludes a lot of people and can also put a lot of guilt on those people unintentionally that, oh, Emma says that I need to reduce emissions and the only way to do that is by walking, but I literally cannot walk, or I don't have the ability to give up my car. So therefore, I'm a bad environmentalist. Again, I'm not actively saying that, but it can come across that way. So instead, I say something like, if you're able to, consider giving up your car and try biking or walking where possible. It's softer, it isn't quite as pointed, and hopefully doesn't come across as judgmental. And this is a stride that I have really loved to see in the eco movement over the years, just making the movement less judgmental and less harsh overall. Because yeah, back in the day, it very much was the vibe that you need to do a trash jar, and if all of your trash for your entire life doesn't fit into an 8-ounce mason jar, you suck. Nobody was explicitly saying that, but that was just the vibe. But in recent years, it has really been amazing for people to understand that, hey, I'm not the problem, you're not the problem, CEOs are the problem, governments are the problem. Of course, we still have a role to play. We can still do a lot of good as little people down here at the bottom, but we shouldn't be sitting here shaming one another. And also just the language of, hey, you don't have to be perfect. You can try your best. If you can only do these 5 things for the planet, that's better than doing no things. If you in a few years, you think these 5 things don't work for you anymore and you want to try these 5 things, that's great. There's no one size fits all to be an environmentalist. And I think it's just become a much more inclusive place. Of course, there are still strides to go, but we have come a long way in just the last 5 years or so. Okay, now for accessibility when it comes to in-person activism. As best as you can, hold meetings in accessible locations. And I say as best as you can because, for example, I do a lot of student activism now that I'm a student. Our campus is not very accessible. Therefore, the locations that we are able to pick are very slim. But this is places with ramps, with elevators, with accessible buttons that people can use to press the doors, disabled parking spaces, places that are close distance to town, for example, for people who can't drive or who don't have a car. Because once again, inclusive goes beyond disability. It goes for race, it goes for gender, it goes for budget, etc., etc. But also, as far as you can, make sure that your presentations, pieces of content, meetings are as accessible as possible. This looks like closed captioning, making sure the volume is up high, having seating options, an ASL interpreter if you're able to afford that. I know that's not very common. Offering your meeting on Zoom for people who are not able to leave their homes. Speaking clearly, having clear visual aids. You get the idea. Something else that we can all do is fight for social and disability justice. I'm really glad that you're watching this video and becoming more aware of ableism in the eco space, but let's all take that ableism in the eco space and expand it to worrying about ableism in all spaces. So I hope that you take it a step further and advocate for disability justice and social justice in your school, at your workplace, at your town halls, and all sorts of different social justice issues that affect everyone. Again, it might not affect you, but you should still care about it because it affects a fellow human. Now, why should you care about all this, especially as an environmentalist? Well, it all comes down to intersectionality, which you can learn more about in depth in this video. Every issue is connected and every issue compounds. Just like the effects of climate change compound if you have a disability, the same thing if you are of a certain gender, if you are of a certain race, if you are of a certain sexuality. So this is why I think that environmentalists should care about plenty of social issues, and not just climate change. Now, no, I'm not asking for anybody to become an expert on all of these topics all at once overnight, but simply just speak up when and where you can. Share petitions, share infographics that you see online, boost content that you see online by commenting and liking on it. Because at the end of the day, it is all connected and we cannot have a clean planet without tackling other social issues too. Okay, next, we have to be mindful of ableist rhetoric and shut it down. We have to be willing to stand up to hate speech. If you see someone being ableist online or in person, shut it down. This may also look like self-correcting as well. In many ways, again, this could look like intentional ableism or unintentional. A lot of the times it's just unintentional. For example, a lot of ableist slurs people don't realize are slurs and have been used to marginalize certain groups of people for decades, maybe even centuries. Once again, we'll bring it back to like the plastic in the produce section. I see this conversation a lot in the eco space online. I see plenty of able-bodied creators talking about how pre-cut fruit is so wasteful, nobody should be buying this, it's such a waste, yada yada yada. Again, I assume that they have good intentions. They care about plastic, they care about pollution, they care about the planet. They probably just could have approached it with a little more sensitivity. So I will call them in, and I find that correcting people works best in private, even online. The comment sections are public, people can see those, they might feel offended, they might be embarrassed, so I will DM them instead and say something along the lines of, hey, I know that you had good intentions here, I know that you care about plastic, I know that you care about the planet, but unfortunately your perspective here did exclude disabled people. Plenty of people do rely on this pre-cut fruit because it's their only available option. So that's just something to keep in mind in your future content. And also, I've seen this too on like a couple like semi-viral videos, like hundreds of comments being like, but disabled people need this, but disabled people need this, but disabled people need this. They get the idea. They don't need hundreds of people calling them out over and over and over again, especially if it was unintentional. I think it is much more effective to correct people kindly and not rudely. Another example is when I talk about libraries, I will, even for myself, will say, I read an audiobook. These are all the audiobooks that I read this year, and I get so many comments across all platforms of people being like, actually, that's not reading. Unfortunately, that is unintentionally ableist. There are plenty of reasons why someone needs to and wants to listen to an audiobook, and this is a form of accessibility that also benefits able-bodied people. We all benefit from accessibility. And a last note on this specific topic is that disability is not a bad word. Notice how I have used it throughout this entire video. In fact, it's often considered offensive by disabled people if you use words like differently abled, this is your superpower, in that sort of type of language. Because guess what? It's okay to be disabled. It's not bad to be disabled. And therefore, it's okay to use the word disabled even if you're able-bodied. And the last thing that we can do here is to get educated. Get educated about climate issues and also disability issues and how they are connected. Even as a disabled person, I'm only aware of my disabilities and how those specific disabilities affect my life. Someone else with arthritis, someone else with migraines are gonna have a completely different life than I'm having. People will always have different lived experiences, even if they share a disability, which is why it's important to listen to so many different diverse voices. This looks like following disabled content creators, listening to their stories, reading books about disability, reading books by disabled authors, and it also looks like sharing what you learn with others. I have lots of books about eco topics and also disability topics on my website, but here's some of my favorite books about disability. First is True Biz, which is a fiction book about being deaf and about how our young main character comes to terms with her own deafness and really learns to accept it. A nonfiction one that I loved is Demystifying Disability. It talks a lot about ableist slurs, it talks a lot about how you can be unintentionally ableist, and also how you can be a better disability ally. Unmasking Autism is a great nonfiction book about destigmatizing autism. Cassandra in Reverse is fiction, and our main character is autistic, but she doesn't know it until she's an adult. I think she might even be in her 30s, a very late diagnosed autistic woman. And it's also kind of got some sci-fi vibes because she does time travel, so it's a very, very fun read. Disability Visibility is another nonfiction recommendation. Sipping Dom Perignon Through a Straw is nonfiction memoir. I love memoirs, and this was a really, really great one. And lastly is The Invisible Kingdom, which talks about specifically invisible illnesses and chronic illnesses, and that is nonfiction as well. Please leave your book recommendations down below. I would love to expand my never-ending TBR. Thank you so much for watching this video and taking the time to learn about accessibility. Just like with unpacking anything, it takes time to unpack being ableist. Because yeah, our world is ableist. It is centered around able-bodied people, and it takes a lot of work to understand that and how accessibility does nothing but positively affect us all. You may slip up, you might say something that's not very inclusive, so acknowledge your faults, learn from that moment, and move forward. Keep learning, keep unpacking, and keep listening to disabled people. And be an advocate. Once again, you do not have to be disabled to stand up for disabled rights. Anyone can and should be a fan of accessibility. So let's keep working to be more inclusive, accepting, and accessible. Once again, leave your book recommendations down below, leave your tips for being a more inclusive environmentalist down below. And if you hear the term environmentalist and think, I'm not really sure that applies to me, you can check out this video next. Thank you so much yet again for making it all the way to the end. I really appreciate your time, especially if you made it all the way to the end. But that's all for now. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, remember that your small actions make a big difference in the long run. Bye, guys. For people to take public transit, walk, and make it mandatory for people to drive. Oh my gosh, I'm reading it. Becoming more aware of ableism. Jeez, I keep forgetting the word. Oh, does this smell nice? I just got this shirt in the mail. Secondhand, reworked by FAVES. You probably recognize her work. Oh. You smell like laundry. She sleeps in the laundry closet. You're so big. Look at the size of this.